This is ground level. These elevators, these storage facilities, were made of brick and limestone. Limestone was underneath, brick was on top of the ground, and the depth, one to the next, 164 feet. It went down into the ground, and you can still see that at the example in Saqqara, and you can look down and you can still see, and these are steps. The steps started at the ground level, and you could walk down all the way to the bottom. As the grain is taken, then you can go down further and further and further if you want to. Now, the height that it stuck up in the air was 230 feet. And which was quite phenomenal, because now you're talking about something that is twice the size of a typical water tank of a municipal water supply. I mean, that's huge. But it was one of the most phenomenal engineering feats in the world at that time, and it all came out of Joseph's head. And the size of this thing the size of it was approximately 60 feet square. And he built 800 of these. And every bit of it was used for the storing of grain. And you would, the door being here at this point, you would take the grain out, and as it would collapse, then more and more was taken, and you could actually walk all the way down to the bottom to get the lower levels of the grain. And then that wasn't the only thing. He did something that was even more phenomenal, in my opinion. He made these kind of like a beehive arrangement. And this was 33 feet tall. Now, the beehive itself was 230 feet diameter. And this was a storage facility for the storage of grain, which, you know, that in itself is phenomenal enough. But what he did is that these were placed on a granite and limestone foundation. And these beehive things set on this foundation, and it stored the grain. But the phenomenal thing about it is that this was 28 miles long by 13 miles wide. And you could still see these foundations today. And in this large area, you could fit anywhere between 5,000 and 10,000 of these separate beehives. The foundation itself was initially, the bottom layer was limestone. And that limestone foundation was 4 feet thick. And then on top of the limestone, you had a finishing foundation of granite, and that granite was 1 foot thick. Now, on these facilities, they placed these beehive storage tanks, and in all of these, he made 28 of these independent foundations with all these beehive storage tanks on them, 28, which gave a total of approximately 50,000 of these individual beehive storage facilities. And to say that the gathering of the grain was almost unfathomable is certainly well believable with this. Now, that was the storage of the grain, but in addition to that, to these storage facilities, he also built ships and barges, over 400 of them. And these ships and barges would be docked along the Mediterranean coast, all the way down both sides of the Nile River, both sides of the Gulf of Suez, both sides of the Gulf of Aqaba, and both sides of the Red Sea as far down as it went. And these were filled with grain, corn, wheat, rye, and so forth. And within the capacity of those ships itself, they stored more grain than what Egypt had produced in the last 300 years combined, just in those ships. In addition, you had the perishable goods. You're talking about meat, seafood, fish, as well as perishable vegetables. Joseph did something, came out of his head, obviously through God's inspiration, that had never been done before in the history of mankind. Joseph invented drying, sun drying. I guess the original jerky. Okay. And not only that, but you also store in vinegar. That was the first time ever. Plus storing in honey. They had honey, just tons and tons of it that was produced. And it was estimated at that time that the bee production in Egypt quadrupled almost overnight to produce the honey that was needed. The dried and the smoked and the pickled was unprecedented, and it was needed. And not only for the seafood and the fish, the meat, but also, as I said, for the vegetables and for fruit and that type of thing that was going to be needed to eat. And so, for the first time ever, this system of preservation was brought into existence, and it was brought into existence for the preservation of life, for the civilization in Egypt. And it all came out of Egypt's head, or Joseph's head. In addition to that, he built cisterns And cisterns were, okay, this is ground level here. You have a wellhead. Then the cistern itself would be like this. And you fill it up with water. And the depth, then you'd have steps that you could go down as the water diminishes. Okay. This is about 130 feet deep. And down here, you're talking about approximately 90 to 100 feet in diameter. He built 1,300 of them throughout Egypt to store water for drinking. And what he figured, and what was estimated, in our system today, we'll go with gallons. They use the sarat. Sarat was about 2.2 gallons. And so he figured one sarat per person, per day, for 7 years. And that's the amount of water that they stored specifically for human consumption. And then he also had above-ground tanks. And these above-ground tanks were for animals, and so that the animals could remain draft animals for plowing, as well as transportation animals and so forth. And so the need to store water was something that was just as valuable as the grain, and certainly just as needful as the grain. And the need that Joseph had to preserve the people was dependent upon preserving the land. And what Joseph did to preserve the land was this. Starting from the Delta region up here, every 3 miles, starting from the Nile River, 3 miles out, additional 3 miles, additional 3 miles, then he built what is called a weather break. And what it was a wall like this. The wall itself at the base was approximately 90 feet. Then there was an area that went up about 19 degrees before it straightened up into a regular wall. And the wall itself was 280 feet high. The information that God gave him was that the 7 years of bad would come from the east. Now, which is quite unusual, because weather travels from west to east. Just like when you look at your weather every night on your TV, you'll notice that the weather comes from the Rocky Mountains and finally comes over to us. So weather, from the very beginning, from the time that Noah landed on Ararat, weather patterns move from west to east. But this was divinely inspired. This wasn't natural. And so this weather pattern started in the east and moved west. And so because of that, Joseph established these windbreaks every 3 miles, all the way down to the length of Egypt. And with these breaks, it would prevent the air or the wind from coming from the east, and it would hit this area here and actually roll around like that and make it to non-effect as far as negative effect is concerned. And then behind these wind breaks, between the 3 miles, that's where during the time of bad, they were still able to harvest crops and to plant crops because it was protected. And so they had their own irrigation system behind there. And also behind this is where the animals were protected. Draft animals that were used to plow with or to harvest with, they were protected behind this area. And in the very heart, in the midst of the 7 years of bad, horses and oxen and so forth could be protected behind that, as well as your sheep and your goats and so forth. And so even domestic animals like cats or dogs could be protected in this way. And so by the time the 7 years of good were winding down, Joseph has succeeded in preparing the people of Egypt for a catastrophe that's going to be unprecedented. And Joseph was prepared for that. But what Joseph did not realize, even as smart as he was, obviously he did not realize that he was not called to preserve the civilization and the people of Egypt. He was called to save the people of the world, which is quite phenomenal. Whenever, even all of you perhaps, maybe you feel like God has called you to do a certain thing. He's called you to be a men's ministry director. He's called you to be a Sunday school teacher, a youth leader. And you feel confident that, yes, I'm ready for that. But maybe God has called you for something more. Maybe he's called you for something greater and something even more involved than what you think that you're called to do. And this was the case with Joseph. He knew he had been called to save the people of Egypt. But what he didn't realize, that he had been called to save the people of the world. And so all this preparation, and I'm sure that the Holy Spirit kept pushing him, pushing. See, we're producing 500 times more than we did last year. Why do we have to up it to 700 times? It's because the people of the world were at stake, not just the people of Egypt. And so by the time March of 1538 BC hit, the beginning of the 7 years of bad, Egypt was ready, but the world was not.
My name is Brad Charles. I'm the president of the Cubit Foundation. At the Cubit Foundation, we primarily focus on helping widows and orphans all around the world. I'm a carpenter. I know how to build things out of wood. I like organizing trips that get people out of their normal life and bring them to somewhere that's completely foreign to them, and they actually produce a project, like they build something with their own hands. I started traveling and serving in this way when I was around 13, and from that time I've always had a soft spot for Mexico.
My name is Micah Carter. I'm the director of Big Heart Orphanage here in Reynosa, along with my wife Jennifer and my sister Opal. We've been directors here for 2.5 years. At Big Heart Orphanage, we focus on children and their lives and to give them a better future.
The difference that Big Heart has made in this community, in my mind's eye, is saving kids from poverty. Big Heart puts these kids through school, gives them a place to live, provides all their medical needs. I mean, you name it, they do it.
My parents came to Mexico when I was 3 years old. I grew up in the mission field with my parents, and so Mexico is home to me.
We're great friends, and I trust Micah. I admire his drive. I admire his follow through, and he puts up with me and all my stuff.
Brad Charles and the Cupid Foundation have been a huge blessing to Big Heart. We really enjoyed working alongside each other. They've just been a huge help in the way that they come, they serve, and we've been able to build amazing relationships through the time that they've been here. One of the big focuses that we've always had with our kids is knowing the fact that education plays a huge part in this country, and unfortunately the local schools don't have the best education. So we felt upon our hearts that we needed to build a school for our kids and do a homeschooling style, but because of the need in our community, we were able to expand that and then open it up as a private school. The school's name is Regents. We have now 500 kids coming from kindergarten all the way up through high school.
At the Cupid Foundation, we have a great opportunity to start a carpentry class and welding metal fabrication classes involving a Regents school. So the next step with the Cupid Foundation with Big Heart and Regents School is to start these 2 classes and build onto that, and then these classes are going to train kids to do something with their life after they get out of school.
I'm really excited about the next steps for Regents. We're looking at now teaming up with Cubit Foundation and them being able to show a trade to these kids that really broadens the effect that we'll be able to have on this community and on our students.
I'm going to be teaching the carpentry classes for Regents, but my friend Ed, he's going to be teaching welding. I've traveled all around the world with Ed, from Egypt to Colombia, Mexico. He's a great guy, he's got a great heart. He'll do anything for these kids.
Oh, we don't have that much time for me to tell you what I think about Brad Charles. My name is Ed Tanner. I'm a welder fabricator of metals, welding and cutting and grinding metals. I've been doing this for 44 years. Brad has turned out to be a positive influence in my life. Brad has gotten stuff out of me that I would have never tried by myself. When I first came to Big Heart and Brad asked me to come and go on a mission trip, I had no idea what a mission trip could be taken to do. And it gave me a very good feeling about the direction of my life was going.
What I would personally like to do with every kid that takes a class is, teach them a trade, teach them when they get out of school that they can actually do something with their own hands and make money at it and raise a family and get a wife, have some kids, even build a house if they wanted to. So I want to invest that time and time and money into these kids because I do care about them and I want them to have a better life.
The area of Reynosa where Big Heart and Regents is located is a low to middle class. And surrounding us are multiple factories, and that is a common job for somebody in this area. It's a reliable job. It's not the best paying job, where if someone has an education or has a trade, will then be able to have opportunities to be an entrepreneur, start their own business, start doing things on their own, where they would have more of an effect on their community too, where they're pouring into their community and not just working at a factory.
There will always be welding fabrication in this world today. A good welder can find a job anywhere they want to go.
The reason why it's so important that kids have a trade when they get out of high school, if they're not going to college, I mean, they get pulled into drugs, they get pulled into being in gangs, they get pulled into prostitution. I mean, you name it. They need a direction, and we're here to help direct them in their next path.
And starting this new adventure, I would call it, with adding these trades to the school, we do have some work that needs to be done on the facilities that we're going to be using for these trade classes.
We have to buy tools, and we have to fill the shop with tools and safety gear and everything that goes along with the shop for 15 kids. Not just 1 year, but year after year after year after year.
It's going to take welding machines, grinders, drill presses. It's going to take cut and torch outfits. It's going to take safety equipment. So we got a long way to go, but we're off to a good start. And I see a lot of potential right here where we're at.
Big Heart Orphanage and Regents is 100% funded, primarily by individuals that have come and been a part of what we're doing here and have seen the need and have decided to support what goes on here 24/7 all year long.
I'm not going to get paid to do these classes. I don't take a salary from Cuba Foundation.
What do I want out of this? To feel good about my life, to feel good about what I've done, and to share the positive things and the good things in my life, to maybe pass it on to another generation.
I mean, it would be great, an explosion of kids interested in learning these trades.
Anywhere that we can have a positive influence on the next generation, it's an investment into the future. And that's what I'm excited about as far as being a part of a positive investment in people's lives.
I really want to see the Cuba Foundation doing these carpentry classes, doing these welding classes, but I'm really going to need your help. You can spend money on all kinds of things in your whole life. Why not invest in a kid, teaching them a trade, and helping them when they graduate high school to get out and join the workforce and start a great family? And, you know, by helping out with this project, it's going to do it. It's going to impact somebody's life for the rest of their life.